Okay. Mr. Chavez, English 2, I told you that we were going to go over the essential question that is going to revolve all around Unit 1. Everything that we do is going to revolve around this essential question. All the passages that we read, any songs that we're going to look at and analyze, any poems that we're going to look at and analyze are going to revolve around this question. So let's take a look at what we got. All right. What I have here is this. Okay, so the essential question for this unit is, what is it like to be a teenager in today's world? I want to know about the struggles. I want to know about your fears, popular culture today, employment. What is employment like? I know a lot of you guys are 15 right now, but you will be 16, and some of you are already working. You've figured out a way to earn some money before you turn 16, and that's really cool. What are your political What's your political ideology? Social standards. What kind of social standards are going on right now? Okay. So, for instance, when I ask about struggles, what does the teenager today struggle with that a lot of people aren't that sure of? For instance, I struggled, there was one year that I had a bully that was bullying me. Okay. But every day, I could go home and be free of that bully. But now with Facebook and with Snapchat and Instagram and all those things, Twitter, that bully follows you around everywhere you go. And so those are the things that I want you to think about. What kind of fears do you have? Do you fear that you're not popular? Do you fear about your family, your home situation? Are you in fear of what you're going to be in life? Are you in fear of letting your parents down? Are your parents putting a lot of pressure on you to make sure that you make good grades, and that's just something that's really difficult for you? Um, Popular culture today, that I'm completely out of touch on. I have officially become that old man who doesn't know what you're going through. Okay. Um, Popular culture when I was your age was a lot different than popular culture now. So I want to know about the popular culture, and I'm going to need you to tell me about that. Employment. Okay. I've had a lot of students who, they have uncles or they have dads that own companies, and they already work and they're already getting work experience. They've already entered that world where they've realized that, what, my attitude, the things that I say, the way that I dress, the way I present myself is very important. And in order for me to have money put into my bank account every week, I have to adhere to certain rules, and I have to put up with a rude customer. And, so what kind of things is there revolving employment? Politics. A lot of you guys, when it comes to politics, it has everything to do with what your parents believe. Your parents have passed on their political ideology to you. How many of you guys have stepped outside of that? How many of you guys have said, you know what, my parents are Democrats, but I don't know if I agree with Democratic philosophy, so I'm going to look at the Republican philosophy. I'm going to watch a lot more Fox News. I'm going to listen to a lot more Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro, and I'm going to see if I agree with my parents. Some of you may have disagreed with your parents, and then you've realized that your parents were right all along. Some of you may have no political aspirations whatsoever, and let me tell you something, that'll change once you start working. Social standards. What social standards are important right now? Do you exist in a world where social standards with regard to accepting people for who they are, is that important? Are you sensitive to people who live a different lifestyle or have a different sexual orientation? Are you sympathetic or understanding of somebody who is of a different culture or of a different race than you? Are you part of that culture or race that is typically looked down on? And you strive to either make something of that social standard or get away from it. Who knows? There's all these things that exist in being a teenager today. So I'm going to give you just a little glimpse into my world when I was your age. Okay. So this right here was the telephone. This was the telephone when I was your age. And I really loved the telephone back in those days, because you know what was the best thing about these telephones? They were made out of a very hard plastic. And when you got mad at your girlfriend on the other end of that phone, you could slam that phone and that thing would never break. And that was kind of the thing, it's like you knew when somebody hung up on you and they'd slam that phone on the ringer. Um, we don't have this anymore. This is not the phone of today. I don't even know where you can buy these. But that was the phone. And, the other thing is that this kind of phone, there was usually like one in the living room or the den. There was one, near the kitchen. And then maybe your older sister or your older brother had one in their room and you could go and use that one. But that was the phone. This right here, this is a word processor, okay, or typewriter. This is how I had to write my essays. I wasn't writing my essays on a computer yet. We didn't have computers yet. We didn't have the internet. And because we didn't have the internet, you had to own a really nice set of encyclopedias in order to find anything else so you could add it to your essay, your research paper. And if you couldn't afford, because these were expensive, if you couldn't afford a good set of encyclopedias, then you had to go to the public library. You had to have somebody drive you there, drop you off. You had to use a card catalog, and you had to go look for the book that you wanted to check out. And then you had to take it back to the table, and you had to look up all the information that you needed and go make copies, and you had to do all this stuff. I mean, it was so much work. The coolest thing about going to the library, though, is if you had a classmate that you were interested in, you could invite them over to the library for, let's study together. And you would go up there, but really and truly your intentions was to get to know them better and, hopefully gain up the courage to ask them out. The public library, this is the Irving Public Library where I grew up, and it was right next to a Wendy's. And so that was always the coolest thing. Like whenever I was with my friends or if I was with a girl that I was interested in, it was like we would always go to Wendy's and eat. And of course, it sort of counted as a date. You could slip in a date there. Okay, these were TVs back when I was a kid. Okay, big, huge console that sat on the floor. And usually, if you were lucky enough and rich enough to have a VCR, that sat on top of it. And you had antennas. And then once cable TV came in, it's like we just started hooking it up to our cable TV and we didn't need antennas. This right here is a VCR. This is a VHS tape, okay? When you wanted to record something, a TV show that you wanted to watch, we didn't have DVRs back in those days. And let me tell you something. If you were watching a series and you missed an episode, you were out of luck, period. So you always made sure that you had plenty of these tapes lying around, and you would stick that in the VCR and you would set the recording and it would record that show while you were gone, at your soccer game or your baseball game. And then you took the pen and you wrote down what you recorded on here so you could watch it later. This was the Commodore 64 computer. This was one of the first big computers that you could have that you could, write papers on, and you could play video games with it. And it used a 5.5 floppy disk. This was the Sega Genesis. Now, a lot of people had Nintendos. I was a Sega person, but I had a lot of friends that had Nintendos. And so this was the video gaming system that we had back in those days. And you couldn't play people across the world. You could only play your friends that were right next to you. This is a payphone, guys. I don't know if you've ever seen a payphone before, but, if I was driving down the street and I remembered that I had to call a friend, then hopefully I had a quarter on me and I would drive by, a business and there would always be a payphone outside, and I would stop and I would call that person on the payphone and say, hey, man, what's going on? This right here is a note, okay? This is how we texted back in those days. If you got a note from a friend and there was a certain way to fold it. And of course, the female friends that you had, they would draw a little heart on here and they would put little notes on it, open here, and, the smiley faces and stuff. And then this was one of our basic forms of entertainment was MTV. Back in those days, MTV, they actually played music. They played music videos all the time. They didn't play, like now they never play music videos. I don't even know if they make music videos anymore, but it was music. I mean, it was like me and my friends, man, we would sit for hours and watch video after video after video and wait for that Motley Crue and that Bon Jovi video to come on and that new, Madonna video that was coming out. We just liked Madonna because she was good looking. But, this is the stuff that was very big when I was a teenager. And like I said before, we didn't have the pressures of social media. We didn't have the internet to make everything easier on us. We didn't have the computers that, I mean, typing papers, what you really had to know how to type. And had to know how to type well because fixing your keystrokes wasn't as easy as just backspacing. You had to fix it. TVs were huge. I mean, they weren't these thin little light things that they are now. They were huge and they were heavy and they were expensive. And if it went out, you had to go buy a new one and you had to make sure you had a truck because you couldn't put it in your car. And it was a big deal. So, anyways, this was what it was like being a teenager when I was your age. And now, what I want to know throughout this unit is what is it like being a teenager for you? Is it Do you consider yourself lucky? Do you wish that you lived in my time? Do you wish that you lived back in the 20s and it would have been easier back in those days? What necessarily is it? I mean, I want to know every aspect of what it's like to be a teenager because those are the things that you're going to have to pull from yourself. You're going to have to extract and you're going to have to put them in your writing. Okay? You're going to have to sit there and you're going to have to relate. When you read something, you're going to have to relate. How does what's going on in this paper, relate to me? How can I put a piece of myself on this essay and make it interesting to show that I know what's going on? Okay, that's the most important thing, and that's what we're going to be working on. If you have any questions, email me and let me know or ask me in class. Okay, I'll talk to you later.